we cannot continue to operate in this idea of that we're going to have consistent month over month growth and we're going to grow at all costs. And that the return on the investment is really important because there have been plenty examples of those companies getting that funding, responding to those funders, and then causing harm. And when it comes to digital wellness, if you're causing harm, let me just break it down from an economic perspective. You're not going to go back and use that product.
What's up, everybody? This is Mike from Polyform Studio, and this is Product Lab, the show that explores the product strategies of startups through interviews, experiences, and stories with the founders. Today, we're joined by Dani Bicknell, the Senior Program Manager for Second Muse, a global social innovation company where she leads the digital wellbeing innovation accelerator Headstream. We have a lot of fantastic content today talking about her works with early stage entrepreneurs in the digital health, ed tech, and social tech sectors. So stay tuned. There's going to be tons of great stuff today. We are joined by Dani today. Let's dive into the background of Headstream specifically. So tell us about Headstream.
Thank you so much. I'd love to tell you a little bit about Headstream, which is also powered by Second Muse, which is a social, an international social innovation company. And so we fund and power projects that protect the planet and benefit people. And Headstream is one of those projects that really focus on promoting digital wellness. And we focus on youth as kind of our guiding light, because as we see that there are many discriminatory structures, there's both individual, structural, and institutional racism in the real world. We didn't want that to be mirrored in the digital world. And so we see the digital world as an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurs to build, for youth to not just survive, but thrive in these digital places. And then for digital health, ed tech, and social tech to come together to figure out how to create products that are truly representative of the people that are using them. And so I have been privileged to lead the accelerator work. We've had 3 cohorts where we're working with entrepreneurs to really scale that. And Adam has been a professional advisor several times over. So shout out and grateful for that.
Wow.
And so that's us kind of activating the grassroots section. Then we also have open source research tools that we do to kind of demystify what does digital wellness mean, and help educate both funders, large tech companies, researchers, and the government sector so that they might be able to approach digital wellness with a bit more mindfulness themselves. And then the last, but certainly not the least pillar of Headstream is our youth programs. And so just as you might be familiar with human-centered design, we really take a youth-centered design framework. So we pair our entrepreneurs with youth, and we have them play an active role on their board while they're in the accelerator. So they can do anything from focus groups to actually writing messaging to looking at product tweaks. And so we like to bring them along the journey from ideation to iteration. And we found that it's been really successful so that these products are meeting youth where they need to be, not where they should be, which is where we've seen a lot of these products happen. Is the growth has been tremendous, but building with youth has always been kind of an afterthought.
Absolutely.
And since they don't have a lot of the same rights, like financial rights, regular rights, we thought if we wanted to make this truly inclusive, we got to have them be part of the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. That's something, as you said, we go way back. We've been head streaming together for quite some time. Nice. But even before that, we were roomies in university, the whole deal. So really good, long-term collaboration of minds here. So happy to have you on the show. But something I took from Headstream, working with you all over there for so long, is this idea of like working with the youth. And with a lot of the startups that we work with at Polyform now, we create especially when they're serving Gen Z or Gen Alpha or whatever, we've created these like junior boards at a lot of the startups, and it's been so beneficial and like instrumental to their success. So I really love that concept that you brought to us and are bringing to the world of getting these people involved and getting their voices heard, and not just like telling them what they need, but having them have this input into what they actually want.
Wow,
right?
totally flipping the coin on itself, right? It's such a valuable additional set of insight as well, that unless you're a part of that group, you are totally missing out on, right? Or not accounting for when you go about building.
So I had a question real quick, a clarification maybe. Digital wellness. I think everybody knows what digital is. Everybody knows what wellness is. What's your definition of what digital wellness means?
That's a great question.
Okay, I love this question because my answer is going to be frustrating, and that's a good thing. So, in our journey of creating digital wellness, we have found that there are more things that it is not than what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so here is the reason for that. And I also want to interject with like how our paths have crossed in some really cool ways. Is Headstream was born out of an idea that people are going online to digital places. And although we're seeing a lot of these negative effects that the media likes to report on, they're going there no matter what. And so if we don't start showcasing, uplifting, and championing the positive things that are happening in these places, then we're not really working with the digital world. We're kind of working against it. And so back during the very beginning of COVID, Headstream was supposed to be a hybrid program where we were going to work in person, and that didn't actually happen. We had to very quickly pivot and turn a 5-month hybrid accelerator program working with international entrepreneurs from like several different continents into 100% digital program. And that's where we had this like beautiful opening of, and we can talk about this later, like extra time. So Adam, you and I connected, and you actually, when I was trying to see if you could be an advisor for us, you were like, I'm actually working with this company called Blue Fever and Greta McEnany. And so like, shout out to a previous episode. You were starting to engage in this, what digital wellness looks like, and to give testament to Greta's product, Blue Fever. A lot of these products emerged from COVID. So what our original thought of digital wellness was, which was primarily thought of as like mental health, really expanded into like, no, it's social emotional well-being. It's also like identity validation, and it's activism. It is community. It is so many things that we didn't realize in the beginning. And so instead of trying to keep our hypothesis narrow, we took those like retainers off, and we were like, okay, digital wellness can be so much more. And depending on whether you're working in social tech or in digital health or in ed tech, and in many cases, we see that there's like intersections in those sectors.
Absolutely.
Digital wellness will mean something different for you. And so that's why we kind of like to expand this definition, because some people are like, oh man, I just want an answer. And we're like, yeah, but now when you go back, you'll start to formulate your own answer for how it applies to your company, how it applies to your team, and how it applies to you personally. So it's been like both a personal journey for me in trying to define that, and then also a professional one.
Dude, that makes me think of that Spider-Man meme where the 3 Spider-Men are, it's like, what's digital wellness to you? I don't know. What does it mean for you? Well, I don't know. What's important? What's it not? You know, it's kind of like, well, take it inwards, you know?
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Yeah, for each of us, something new. And going through, you know, the work and the journey with Blue Fever especially, we really also dove deep into like, what is digital wellness? What is the pursuit of wellness through a digital medium? You know, if I'm trying to like get well with a digital tool, what does that even mean? How is it facilitated? How can you do it with also trying to make sure that you're not also like causing some harm in some weird way that you couldn't foresee, right? So it's even just for that one project, so complicated, can get so deep. But you know, the cornerstone, I think, to what's coming up next.
Oh, exactly. So this is, we talked a lot about Headstream particular. We talked about the idea of digital wellness and how important it is, especially in like a post-COVID era. But when we were talking about Headstream, you mentioned, international entrepreneurs, many verticals kind of like coming together to solve problems. What is like the ideal candidate for like a Headstream applicant look like? Like what makes for like the best, blow your mind candidate?
Wow, that is such a tough question because I've been so humbled by the entrepreneurs that I've seen at Headstream. And there's been so many shining examples where I feel like a combination of lived and professional experiences, I think, is really key to being a resilient entrepreneur in the digital wellness space, but also having line of sight of like how to build with your communities and not just what you think is good for them. And so particularly, we have specifically focused on supporting BIPOC, LGBTQ plus founders in the intersections of like these multi-hyphenate entrepreneurs, because we found a lot of these digital systems both support and alienate marginalized groups. And a lot of this reason is not done intentionally. It's just done from more of an engineering perspective of zeros and ones. Like we just have to build it this way. And now that we have these incredible entrepreneurs that are coming into Headstream and saying, but here's how you build it mindfully. Here's how you do it so you're not alienating people, I think is not only good for Headstream, it's good for the entire sector. It's good for all of entrepreneurship. And so I say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And when you look at how tech products are built, they're usually very scrappy teams of the majority of like white men, and regardless of their intentions, they build fast. I hated the term like build fast and break things, because when it comes to digital wellness, breaking things could be harming people and hurting them, or the lesser side of that, which is just creating a product that's meant to inspire instead of like, and then the intent is, or what ends up happening is it ends up addicting people as instead. So when I see Headstream entrepreneurs like up against all these challenges, taking them in, and still fighting this fight of like, I want to build something that people truly use and benefit from, that I think is like really what makes Headstream shine. I also tell people that when you come to Headstream, you're not coming to a traditional business accelerator. And so if you have some traction, if you have done a pilot, then you've got a little bit of experience under your belt in terms of like, you understand that it's a really challenging industry to break into. And it's also very challenging to sustain and to grow sustainably in. So we take more of an impact approach of, we're not going to try and pretend that this ecosystem is fair and it's all full of meritocracy, but we're going to help you navigate it in a way that's authentic to yourself as a founder and to your mission as a company. So if you're coming with those perspectives, if you're coming willing to be vulnerable and lean into both your lived and professional experiences, I think that makes a great participant for Headstream. And in the end, it's like we all benefit. So that's the beauty of my work, is I get to help people. And in the end, the after effect is like, oh my God, we have so many more users that are using our product and reporting really great outcomes. And so that's what gets me up in the morning and makes me super happy to be doing this work.
That's so cool. The benefits are exponential. If you can have one positive effect here, and then that cascades to all of the users or all of the individuals being affected by it, it's unlike anything else.
This is something I think Polyform strives for a lot too, is, having like a net positive benefit on society by working with startups that are doing great things and accelerating their success. And every time I look at some project we did like a year ago for somebody who's, uplifting some, niche of society in some different way, and see that they're doing well, I'm just like, great. It's like, I feel like we are doing some good things,
Absolutely.
It's like contributing to the solution and not the problem, right?
Had some kind of a hand in it. Now, typically you think of like the accelerator model, and the companies that are in there are all about trying to find some kind of like revenue generating mechanism. Now, is there like a huge focus on that at Headstream, or is like the social impact the equivalent of revenue in this case, like social revenue?
It's such a good question. The one I want to say is like the social impact, because in my firm belief and in my like over 10 years of working in startups, if you are leading with that impact, like the right users and the right revenue will come. But like, let's peel back the curtain and be like, we don't live in that world. Every time I have fundraised myself or spoken with funders, they might get on the podium to talk about social impact, but then they're like, what's the return on the investment?
Oh, no. By the way.
And that's a really important conversation to have, because I think that COVID and the pandemic really set the scene for we cannot continue to operate in this idea of that we're going to have consistent month over month growth, and we're going to grow at all costs, and that the return on the investment is really important, because there have been plenty examples of those companies getting that funding, responding to those funders, and then causing harm. And when it comes to digital wellness, if you're causing harm, let me just break it down from an economic perspective. You're not going to go back and use that product. So if everyone, including the US Surgeon General, to celebrities, to world leaders, are saying we have this mental health crisis, we have this isolation crisis, we want to build innovation in technology, what are these key metrics you're really looking at? I think that in a capitalistic way, it's always been easy to quantify things. It's very easy to measure things when you can put them in numbers. It's a little trickier when you're looking at like social emotional outcomes, and where you're looking at like, oh, I feel so much better after using this. So I've specifically worked with funders to try and demystify the digital wellness space, to let them know that instead of following this herd mentality of we're just going to go after this growth at all costs, or we're just going to force them to like cut corners and scale in these ways, I try and share with them all the positive ways that they can prevent doing that, so that you can actually give a little bit of time to see those social outcomes happen. It is also a reason why I get to serve as an advisor for a lot of these companies. I've been in that ring myself, and it's a really tough conversation to have. So as much as I try and train entrepreneurs to understand, like, this is the ecosystem you're going in, I try and train funders to say, like, you need to reconsider the metrics that you're looking at if you really care about societal wellness at a global level, because these ways that you're starting to assess companies' fundability might ultimately be contributing to the destruction of the world as we know it.
Wow. I know, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Not to be cynical, but
No, not at all.
So working with like a ton of funders and graduates from Headstream, for example, have you started to see like a shift in kind of this like funders or capitalists moving towards like more of like a social impact, more like personal centric, rather than just like the bottom dollar? What's the money I'm going to make on this investment?
So many interesting things happen that I'm so glad that you asked that question. I feel like you're reading my mind a little bit. So as devastating as the pandemic was in a lot of ways, I saw like the entrepreneurial ecosystem from the funder standpoint kind of close their doors for a second. And yet that has never stopped innovation before. We also saw this during the 2008 recession is even though like funders were closing their doors, innovation was still happening. So during that time, I started to see some really interesting incorporation models pop up. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Zebras Unite, but it's a group that's focusing on building zebras, not unicorns, because zebras are
Oh,
real and
yes, I
exist.
have.
I love it.
And they talk a lot about models. There's also a new strategy that, I mean, wasn't born during the pandemic, but was really started to gain some traction, which is this exit to community strategy instead
Yeah.
of like, exiting and just having a few people from the company getting like huge deals and, et cetera. And then in addition to that, I think what we've seen is there's been a hyper concentration of wealth with a certain subset of the population, which without putting a judgment to that has led to a lot more funding opportunities in like the angel and the seed space. So I've seen really quickly funds coming together being like, we actually care about youth mental wellness, or we actually care about digital wellness now. Whereas before I was speaking with entrepreneurs that were like, no one knew what I was talking about. Funders had no idea. So in a few short years, it was like some of those conversations became easier for entrepreneurs that were looking for those funds. I think that the good and bad side of it is when you do see this hyper concentration of capital, as quickly as these funds can appear, they can also disappear. And so a downside of this is we saw in the wake of the George Floyd murder, a lot of corporations, corporate social responsibility funds, funders saying, we really want to start funding BIPOC entrepreneurs. And, there's press releases and all these things happening. And 3 years later, we're seeing that some of those funds were performative and some of those funds are drying up, or there is more of a reversion back to this kind of herd mentality of, oh, we don't want to be so thematically focused. We just want to fund what's good. And you're like, no, you just want to fund what's familiar in your circle. So that has been both like enlightening, because I find that like with every piece of bad news I get, I'm like, oh, there's something really new happening. But as we know, especially in the digital world with like emerging tech, when you're the first, it's not always the best thing, because some people might think you're crazy. And then in a few years, people are like, oh yeah, we're all doing that. So you can remember like when Google Glass came out and caused quite a stir. And now I'm sure like wearables, although it's not looking the same, are like very common in a lot of people's lives. So I really empathize with people that are on these that are like trying to be pioneers in these cutting edge funding mechanisms, that are trying to look for alternative funding mechanisms, and to funders themselves that are trying to find ways to fund innovations or organizations or startups in these new ways. But it's not easy, because it really takes a while to build credibility and accolades. But just like Y Combinator was kind of a weird, funny thing that people were doing, now the word accelerator is very common. So yeah.
Change comes slowly, but sometimes there's like accelerator events like COVID that hopefully push things in the right direction. And like Google Glass, it might not be a perfect hit right out of the gate, but we'll learn from it, and over time, build the right things, and hopefully it'll all become commonplace.
We live in a super cool time. Technology is now like a vehicle of change, more so than it's ever been. And, organizations like Headstream are really, it sounds like, really trying to champion those who are, trying to have like the largest impact on us, the individual. In terms of a lot of the startups or the entrepreneurs that you're working with, what are some of the ways that you're seeing them leverage technology to promote things like economic justice and, dissolving like inequalities that we see? Have there been any interesting examples?
So many, because the most beautiful part of my work is that I go in with a hypothesis, and I am the happiest when I'm proven wrong, which happens like several times a day by working with these entrepreneurs. And so I think one of my superpowers is like meeting entrepreneurs where they are, not where I expect them to be. And so
Okay.
working with that approach, I can come in and say, well, it's really interesting the way that you're building. I'll give a shout out to like one product, and Adam, you're familiar with Throughline, which
Oh
is a wonderful
yeah.
company.
So is Mike with Elliot.
Oh, Live for
Yeah,
Tomorrow.
Live for Tomorrow. Now
Yeah,
called
so Live for
Yo.
Throughline.
Tomorrow is
Yes.
now
Huge
called
shout outs.
Throughline.
Wow.
Love what Elliot's doing over there.
Yeah, I mean it's really incredible the work that they're doing, because I found that at every point that I thought that they were going to have continuing obstacles of building something that really integrates with you where your social media is. So
Mhm.
quick synopsis, um, it's Live for Tomorrow, or Throughline, started out as a chat bot that would access your social media like Instagram and kind of look for what might be self-harming behavior and try and intervene through direct messaging with resources that could allow you to find either a helpline or something to prevent you from taking that step further,
Mhm.
noting that social media has been a way that some people have voiced self-damaging
Mm-hmm.
concerns,
Yeah.
or maybe in worst cases like kind of publicized the self-harm that they want to put on themselves. And it started out with like just an idea that is now like a centralization of hundreds of helplines from around the world that can be integrated into huge tech platforms very seamlessly. And on the user experience side, if you're putting in something in Google that looks like it might be self-harming, you can have a pop-up that has, hey, based on where you're located, here are numbers that you can call, here are resources that you
Wow.
can have. And I think I was really dubious in the beginning that this was possible, because even though tech has no borders, every country has their own ISP, has their
Mm-hmm.
own different regulations. I think that like
Yeah.
tech regulations are usually the slowest to happen in governments. And so usually it's like they try and they're more reactive than they are proactive.
Mhm.
And with each challenge that Throughline faced, they overcame so many obstacles to really consistently provide a product that meets users where they need to be. And so I've kind of used that as a great example of like, I tend to under promise and over deliver as an advisor. So I want to give you like, here's my skepticism first. Here's where I think you might run into some challenges. And each time it was like, challenge accepted. Here's how we're doing this. Challenge accepted. And so I get that with like entrepreneurs all the time, depending on what challenges they're facing. And the ones that I like the most are ones that like challenge my own implicit biases.
Huge shout out to Throughline and Elliot and all the good work that they're doing. It's I'm happy that we met that gang and they were off the ground with their services and products to help people reduce self-harm and provide them with the resources they need before COVID. Because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, their services were needed more than ever.
Oh,
So it was
absolutely.
so nice to meet them and to know that they were out there working hard while so many people were having hard times was reassuring.
Yeah, actually, on that point, and I think the best part of working with entrepreneurs at Headstream is they're like, I wish my thing didn't need to exist. In a
Yeah.
perfect world,
Wow.
I would be out
Yeah.
of a job. Everyone would have the tools and the resources they need. And in general, I love working with those types of entrepreneurs because they're really in it for the mission. And I always say, like, you want to work to put yourself out of a job. And
Yeah.
so that was really how Elliot like leads things. And that's what's really beautiful about working with these Headstream entrepreneurs is you can just see that like they will feel satisfied once like the whole entire ecosystem has been repaired, and then they can hang up their hat and be like, cool,
Yeah.
My work
all
is done.
good.
Yeah.
My company is closed now.
Yeah, exactly. A hard day's work.
Yeah, the problem's been solved.
But what about for like our non-socially focused startup founders, right? Like what can they do?
The
What can
normies.
people like them be doing like today to start making that shift? in their own organization, right? To being less about, obviously, there's a point where you need to keep the lights on, but there's also a point where profits are exceeding the good that's being done by this company, right? So how do you foster that kind of change in thinking between from A to B?
That's such a good question. I do consult with regular old companies too, and I always say, like, the best thing you can start to do is de-risk your mind. And to do that, you need to build a diverse team with people that you admire, that are not afraid to disagree with you. So I've worked with a lot of founders that can get an impressive amount of funding. And in the Silicon Valley area where like I've worked for too long, it kind of creates this messiah complex. And then the more traction and growth you have, you tend to start to surround yourself with people that are just going to agree with you. So even when the problems do get really big, and I always say it's better to start or to like switch to a more socially focused mindset, because like you don't want that PR nightmare. And in American media, as much as we like to lift people up, oh man, do we love to tear people down. We
that's
got the
true.
Theranos, we got the WeWork, we get the Uber, we get the Facebook. It's like name your poison. We're just like, okay, let's find all the ways that you grew too fast. You weren't thinking about your users, and potentially you were putting people on your team that were just going to agree with you so that you would never see your blind sites. So if you're hiring truly diverse teams of people, I always say when I hire my team, I want everyone on the team to be smarter than me. And if you can disagree with me on something and prove me wrong, like even better. The mission is stronger, the company is stronger, and then the team feels more empowered to do their job. And so if you're ever in a situation where and a founder is going to feel like, this is my baby, this is what I've built, and so like don't take that away from me. But a true sign of strength is being able to relinquish some of that control, because you really want the mission to succeed. And where I see maybe a little bit of a red flag is, and I've worked with many startups in the Bay Area that have crashed and burned, where I'm like, they're not going to relinquish that control. They would rather see this crash and burn, because, and it's not, maybe it's narcissism, maybe it's just controlling. There's not like good or bad things I can put around this, but if you aren't able to eventually grow into a leadership position where you're empowering others, allowing them to voice their opinions and have it be a collective and not just the voice of one, that can be really tricky.
Yeah, super good. Yeah, it's so hard to create that mentality shift. Something, as a design organization especially, but also as a design organization for hire, acting as the design organization for a lot of different startups, we really try and press on people that, like, if you want to find the best solution, the most holistic solution, you need a very diverse cast of decision makers. Because if you have one point of view and a bunch of people agreeing, you got like a pretty large blind spot here. But if you've got, a round table of many different points of views and backgrounds and opinions, you can find where all those different things overlap and intersect, and kind of get down to the bottom of like real decision making, right? And making something that is going to most well serve your community, your users, or whatever.
I got a question. Unless you want to go. No, I got one.
No.
We obviously, we do our due diligence over here at Polyform. There was a lot of research that went into Danny before today's interview. And a term that just kept popping up is like humane technology, or like humane technologist, like in relation to yourself. What does that mean exactly? Like, what is your definition?
Tell us.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, I mean, this is also my approach to entrepreneurship, is like, I want to build and support things that honor people as humans and that help them thrive, not survive. And so I've worked in many different technology companies where the metrics for success or how long are they on this app? How much are they not interacting with their family or their friends in real life because we need them to be here? And so if I start seeing things like that, if you have hired me as an advisor, I am that person that's going to say, actually, can we like relook at that? Because retention can be built in a way, and I think that Greta does this really well, where sometimes it's actually more beneficial for them to take a break and only return when they need to. And if we're making that experience quality for them, that long-term retention is what is going to be consistent profit making. But just being able to say, oh, they stayed for 5.5 hours and then they were completely strung out in the end. And then like, you know, they didn't even know their own credit card information because their eyes are blurry from looking at the screen too much. You're like, is that really a humane way of approaching technology? And as we're talking about ChatGPT and AI, I always think it's so funny when people start saying, you know, these machines and these things are going to take us over. And I go, well, humans created them. So there is a way that we can intervene, but if the incentives are not aligned for us to be humane, then of course it's going to be used for destruction, which is why previously I'm saying like you need to have diverse teams. You need to have different theories, different schools of thought in the room to say like, what is actually the incentive we want to give this thing that we're creating all this power around, so that at the end of the day, you're like, nope, ChatGPT is truly a tool. It's not going to take over my job. It's not going to, you know, entice me to do something illegal or unethical, because we have humans on the team that are creating it that way. So as much as we have these conversations in the media that are kind of like Minority Report-esque of like, oh, you know, it's just so out of our control and this digital world is working without our consent, I'm like, because we built it that way. So we can change the algorithm, we can update the source code, but if we don't, and we're not looking at it from a humane perspective, then yeah, it might have some negative repercussions.
Get in there, Command Z quickly. Undo.
Exactly.
The retention one is such a great example, because that's it, right? Is like, in an ideal world, all of our users spend 5 to 6 hours a day on the app. And it, like, those numbers look great for a company like that, but so bad for the people who are glued to their phone, right? So it's those two things at such an opposition is kind of the core of the whole deal there, right? How we need to change it.
So interesting. Like, what is the truth behind this metric, right? You know what I mean? Like retention, like the negative impacts, right? Being had on somebody like that. I got one more
question.
Just
to kind of go on that, like to interject for a second, when we were talking about funders, I also say it for these funders, a lot of them are looking at like how much funding these entrepreneurs have gained. But I'm like, a company that's truly in benefit of its users, look at their revenue. Look at the people that are actually purchasing this product and using it. Because how many times have we seen companies with really a lot of funding, and they're not even in the market yet? They're all pre-product, and you know, there's a lot of like allure or sex appeal to some of these pre-product things. But I'm like, no, if funders are only looking at those metrics, then they might be funding the wrong things. If you're looking at how your users are actually using them, and if they keep coming back, that's actually a better metric for how fundable they are.
But this one, you know, super cool. And it was really inspired by, you know, like the youth board or bringing the youth into the picture, like what you guys are doing at Headstream and what went down at Blue Fever is, are we starting to see like an increase or like more of a weight being put on sustainable products? You typically associate the youth being more, you know, forward thinking in that kind of terms? Are we starting to see that now that they're being more involved in kind of like the startup space, or have more of an opportunity to have their say?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we've been working with a bunch of, I mean, as you know, but we've been working with a bunch of different startups whose, you know, core audience is Gen Z or younger. And it's, you know, we talk to a lot of these people. We work with a lot of these younger folks. And what always comes up with for them is that, you know, they want to work on something impactful. They want to be part of something that's making a positive change. You know, it's very clear. You know, I won't say that when I was a teenager, I was all about the money. I was, you know, pretty anti-establishment and, you know, still am not all about the money. But it seems like this younger generation is even more so that way. And not necessarily just in like an anti-establishment way, but in a let's like roll up our sleeves and like make something better here. We can find solutions. Let's build solutions kind of a way. So I feel like if it's the brands that they buy or the, you know, ideas they want to try and bring to life, there seems to always be an angle of let's make the world a better place, and that being like a really big priority for them, which I think is super inspiring. And I also want to try and like empower them as much as I can with all the resources I can give them so that they can do these things.
I mean, just to build on that, Adam, I my same answer of like, I hope so. And for all the reasons that you said, like, that's what inspires me. I was a very self-righteous teenager myself. And I don't ever want to lose that spirit. And so I get to live that through the youth that feel comfortable enough to say their opinion. I love working with youth advisors because they haven't been tainted by the egotism of entrepreneurship and people getting into a room and being like, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. I love it when they come in and they're just like, this doesn't speak to me. This isn't what I would do. I don't like this messaging. This UI is totally busted. Like, because I think that they're saying what we think, but we just have been conditioned to be more diplomatic. And so for the companies that are listening, you will benefit tremendously because they're not wasting any time. But you're going to probably hear things that you don't want to hear. And so I think that the true innovators are the ones that will come at the end, will have a focus group, and at the end of the session be like, I heard a lot of things that went against what I believe, and we're going to change them because this is what the communities want. And I think that is where like there is a lot of promise, but I'm not going to demonize those that are like a little bit more old school. Like, oh, I don't want to change. Change is hard. You're saying something that like disagrees with me personally and I don't like it. I'm like, well, once you're starting to use statements like that, then your product or your service is going to start to disappear and your ego is going to take over. So yeah, it's like the youth, they're killing it. Are we going to like work with them is really the question. And I think that Polyform has done an incredible job and I'm here for it. So like, yeah, let's keep doing it.
Fantastic plug. Yeah. Yo.
No, I really love what you guys are doing at Polyform Studio. Can I just like fangirl for a second and say,
Please.
I think that you guys both bring in the like down to earth, meet you as founders approach. I think that's really crucial for early stage founders to be met where they are, not where you expect them to be. I consistently think that you guys are bringing in new perspectives. It's both hard to do and you do it very well. And you guys you make your work look fun. And so I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's like, I want to hang out with you in my free time. Yeah. I want to, and those are the best companies to work with. Like after the work is done, would I want to hang out with you guys? Absolutely. So keep doing it. You're killing it.
That is so cool. And,
amazing. Thank you.
It has definitely been a part of the mission,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, it's always been part of the mission to, have
so
fun,
nice.
do good work, have a positive impact, work with good people too.
And that's it.
A joy working with you and the Headstream crew and all the many great startups we've met through there as well. That's been a big joy. And also shout out to the Berkeley crew who you introduced me to as well with the Big Ideas program. We have met so many amazing, very early stage startups, usually like scrappy tech demos, if anything, but just the incredible brains working on incredible projects over there. I would encourage anybody to check it out, Big Ideas program at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and just take a look at some of the problems these students are tackling. It's super inspiring.
It's a wonderful program. It's actually based at all the University of Californias, but headquartered out of Berkeley. And it's an early stage entrepreneurship program that really taught me a lot about what leveling the playing field in entrepreneurship looks like. And so they provide no equity grants to their early stage entrepreneurs. And Headstream follows a very similar format. And so I think that in early entrepreneurship, you need that guidance, you need that mentorship that Polyform and other programs like Big Ideas and Headstream provide. But let's not lie, money's really important too. So when you have that in addition, I feel like you're on the road to success.
Right. Definitely better than without. I want to get into the rapid fire here. We got some really good rapid fires for Danny. Let's start off with number one. So we talked a lot about technology and the intersection of social impact. If there was one book that you could recommend for somebody who's interested in this to learn a little bit more, what would you want to plug?
I'm so glad you asked this question. I think it would be Adam Grant's Give and Take. And so he's mostly like a behavioral psychologist, but he works out of the Wharton School for Business at UPenn. And he kind of breaks down this idea that a business leader looks like one thing and business growth looks like one thing. He really talks about how being generous with your time, your spirit, your energy, humility, being humble, how all these things that we don't necessarily associate as synonyms to success in business actually can be really successful. And so he highlights a bunch of examples. And I think that the world needs more of those examples because the media tends to uplift more of the type A, ruthless dictator. We admire you, but we fear you as a leader. And I think that that's over. Let's bring in a new type of humble warrior type of leadership, which also I was now I can plug the second book, which has been really helpful, which is Strength-Based Leadership. And so Give and Take is wonderful for just looking at examples that go against the status quo in terms of what success looks like. But Strength-Based Leadership is both a book and a quiz where you get to find out what type of leader you are. And so I think one of the myths of entrepreneurship is if you're a CEO, you have to be everything to everyone. This book breaks down what type of leader are you? So for me, I'm restorative. And then you hire the people that are the other types of leader. And together you are a super team. And so it doesn't stress you out because I see people being well, I'm not good at this, but I have to go do this. And I'm well, if you really sink into what you're good at, then you can realize what you're not good at. You hire those people, and then you're actually going to be doing better because you're getting to lean into your own strengths instead of trying to spread yourself too thin.
I feel
important.
I feel like you were kind of talking to me there a little bit, Danny. I was oh damn. I was I am doing that. Yo, you even worse.
That's true. We like to do it all. We like to do it all.
So amazing. Two fantastic books there. I mean, let's talk podcast. If you could recommend a fantastic podcast that you're really into, if it has to do with technology or product, that's even better.
Yeah, one that's more, I think it overlaps with technology and product, but it's much more psychological based, is called Hidden Brain. And so I think it's through NPR, and it really just talks about different ways that we can challenge our own thinking when it comes to our personal, professional lives, or even approaching business. And so recently they did a great episode about like implicit bias and how it shows up, and then like little ways that we might be able to self-correct. And so at the end, you don't feel like you have this huge feat of thing you need to do, but you're like, oh, I've got some actionable steps of how I could like check myself in my next business meeting, or I might have some nice tips to like maybe question how I'm approaching my product or the process or even the team that I'm working with. And so
Wow.
aside from like I'd say the tried and true ones like How I Built This or Masters of Scale, Hidden Brain is the one I'm usually recommending to others.
The perspective, hey, you know? Okay, I just want to cover, we're at time here, but I think it's really important to get Danny's insight on this last one. I think like if there is one common thread that unites startup founders is the resilience to failure, right? Being able to combat that. If you were to give one piece of advice to a founder, an entrepreneur out there, how would you go about it in terms of combating or being resilient to the idea of failure?
Oh gosh, it's surround yourself with people that will teach you, but also nurture you. And so I think that, resilience can only be built when you've got a really great community around you. And no man is an island. So that's not just your co-founder or your business professionals. Those are your partners in your personal life. Those are your friends. Those are your family. But if you can have people that will nurture you, so like hold you when you're down, keep you going, but also challenge you to be like, hey, I really think that this is the right thing that you should do, and do that, with an open heart, then like anything is possible. Because I've seen how detrimental it can be when you don't have those people in your life.
Yeah. You've lived the flip side. Now you know how important it is, right? From
I
experience.
feel like you two might be that for each other in some way.
Yeah.
Yo,
It doesn't
clip
hurt.
that.
I'll
That's
tell
a
you
good
that.
clip.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Amazing. Well, that's everything.
Yeah.
Danny, thank you so much for all of the amazing responses, the insight, like everything. This was really one of the
felt
best.
like the tip of the iceberg of all the
Yeah.
different
So
stuff
true.
to chat about. We'll have to do it again.
I feel like this hour went by in a few minutes, and I just love chatting with you, and just keep up the good work.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're tuning in from. And while you're at it, drop us a like. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.